Hello everyone, how are you doing? I'm doing just great, thanks everyone for asking. Going to keep this live stream quite informal and hopefully I'll be able to answer all your questions about driving this loco and other locos we've done as well. I know they're not the easiest to drive for those who haven't perhaps driven an advanced steam loco before, or maybe haven't driven a real one before. Questions about the Welsh Marches. I've got some good news regarding that. Dovetail Games and myself are working on something which will hopefully mean that at some point in the future it will end up back on sale. So hopefully I'll be able to have some more definite news on that in the future. I see in the chat you're all talking about the injectors. Found out something quite interesting this morning, actually, from a member of the team who discovered something quite interesting. It's on the Facebook page if you want to go and have a look at that, or I'll explain it in depth once we get underway with the driving lesson, as it were. Okay guys, let's get started. I'll talk through each of the controls, what they do, why they do what they do, and I'll try and go right down to the basics with everything, just so that people who are new to steam engines can learn as well, basically. Okay, so what I would say first of all when using these engines is I would avoid using this. It is very good for a lot of things, but unfortunately it's not so good for realism, if you like, and that's what we're all about at Bossman Games. Really, is we're all about trying to make a realistic simulation. So I would encourage anyone to try and drive without it. What I would say is if you press F5, you'll end up with the little display on the left there with all the readouts, and that is really handy, especially the steam generation rate and the steam usage rate. It just really helps you really helps you see what's going on and what you need to do. Second of all, the engine won't use the game's inbuilt automatic fireman correctly, again due to realism and the way in which this loco is set up, as well as other BMG locos actually. So if you press Control R, or if you fold up the fireman's seat, you'll see the automatic fireman will be enabled. Now the automatic fireman on BMG locos will only control the fire, it won't control the water. And the reason for that is, in a realistic situation, the fireman would know the route, he would know the timetable, he'd know where gradients are, he'd know where station stops are, and all these sort of things are crucial for knowing when to put water in the boiler. So we'll come on to the injectors in a minute, as I know a few of you have raised that point already. For now I'm going to switch the automatic fireman off and we'll shut that. You have the cylinder drain cocks here, back to open, forward to shut. I'll go from left to right just to make things a little bit easier for myself. Here we have the reverser and the reverser scale. The reverser is also mentioned on this little F5 readout. So is the cylinder drain cocks there. As you can see, they're open. So going to the reverser, on most locos within Train Simulator it would be a simple W for forward, S for back. It's not too much different on here, but again, for realism, there's a reverser lock, which you can see. If I press the E key, opens. So hold down, and then you can use W or S to move forward. So in this case, I'm going to put it in full forward. If you want, you could a good comparison for a reverser would be perhaps the gears in a car. You start off in first gear, in this case full forward, and as you get faster you'll bring it back, or on a car you change gear. And what the reverser does and what the numbers mean are quite interesting. The reverser extends or reduces the length of travel that the valve is doing. So the valve is here, and this lets steam into the cylinder below. So the longer the travel, the more time the steam has to enter the cylinders. However, the less efficient it is, and then as you get faster, you'll reduce that travel, and the engine will become more efficient as the speed increases. And what the numbers mean is that the valve Now I've got to remember. The valves are open for 75% of the wheel's rotation. I believe that's correct. And then as you reduce it, so that'd be 50% of the wheel's rotation is open, and less and less. Now, I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure I will get a few things wrong, but hey ho. We move on now to the vacuum brakes. Now on a Bully Pacific, you have the small ejector here, which if opened will very slowly create vacuum. And you also have this combined ejector and vacuum brake handle. So in the up position, that also acts as an ejector and will help release the brakes much quicker. For now, we'll keep that in the off, or in the on position, shall I say. You'll also notice here there's a steam brake. In most situations that won't need to be used as it's all automatically controlled with the vacuum handle, but it can be used separately if you're light engine. AWS reset, regulator for emitting steam into the cylinders, blower, left for shut, right for open. We have standards, left for forward and right for reverse. I think you guys all know what this one does here. And then we have some isolation valves for various controls. Again, these don't need to be used, they're open by default, but they're there if you want to use them and just have a play around. There's also this one here, which is the steam heat. We open that, you'll see the steam heat needle begin to rise, and this can be regulated. You can turn this down a little bit just to get the pressure you wish to achieve. But for now, it's a summer day. I don't think the passengers are going to appreciate a load of steam heat coming up between their legs from the heaters under the chairs. Now here's the control for the electric generator. By default this is switched on, and by default all the cab lights are switched on, but these can be controlled over here. You have the main cab lights, the gauge lights for the gauges, and there's also a small light just above the reverser, which is quite handy at night. We'll keep those two on for now. We've also got controls on the water gauges. I'll just switch the light back on so you can see a bit better. Pull them down to close them. If you watch the water level, and open this, and it will drain the water out. Now, going back to the brakes just quickly, if you're driving clan line in its mainline preserved condition, you'll also have an air brake pedestal with a train brake handle on it and two brake gauges. To simulate an air brake train, if you press the page up button on your keyboard, the loco will go into air brake mode. So that means that you can now realistically simulate an air brake train using the air brake handle as your main train brake handle. Whilst you're using that, it's advised to keep these two handles in the release position. Keep them in that position at all times, and just use the air brake handle to control everything. This will control the air brakes. It'll also control the vacuum brakes. On the tender, the only control that you have is the handbrake. There's also cab doors you can open and shut, and same with the windows as well. Down here have the front damper, and here's the rear damper, and I'll show you what they do. This is the front damper door, and this is the rear damper door. What these do is help airflow underneath the fire. This will improve the efficiency and the heat of the fire. And you can see the fire just glowing underneath there. So for better steam generation, I'd recommend keeping those open. Now onto the injectors. Now, with the injectors on this engine, try the hardest to make them as realistic as possible. And I know a few of you have had trouble with them, and hopefully we can get that all sorted today. On a if for example you're doing the full length of the Welsh Marches line, you'd probably be using most of the water in the tender. Unlike a lot of engines that have come before, including things like the BMG Black 5, the Jubilee and stuff, the water consumption just isn't quite right, and you end up arriving at the destination having not really used a lot of water at all. Whereas this one, you get to your destination, you have to fill up if you want to go back. Another nice little feature with these injectors is, if for example you're sat here, safety valves are feathering. In real life, the fireman doesn't want the engine to, doesn't want the safety valves to blow off in the platform. It will scare the passengers. We've all done it. We've all been there next to a steam engine. Suddenly the safety valves have lifted and we've jumped, although we don't admit it. So a nice feature. Put the injector on, and the boiler pressure will come down nicely, just as it would in real life. And remember, these things are putting relatively cold water into a vessel which is filled with boiling water. If you've ever tried doing that with a saucepan at home, you'll see it goes off the boil straight away. So the boiler pressure coming down is realistic. Another thing to note regarding steam usage on this engine, and actually on most engines, all engines within Train Simulator, something that we learned this morning, that if you're driving on a route that is quite intensive on your computer and it brings the frame rate down, this also has a negative effect on the physics of the game. You'll end up using more steam, is a negative consequence of this. If you head over to the Facebook page, we've put up a graph to demonstrate how this is affected through various different frame rates. Anyway, let's see if there's any questions, shall we? Okay, yeah, a question about the ejectors. So what the ejectors do is create vacuum, and if you open the small one a little bit, it will create a little bit of vacuum and release the brakes very slowly. If you can see here, see that's creeping up very slowly. The more I open it up, the quicker it will get, and so on. When you're releasing the brakes, there's no problem at all having both of these open to get the brakes off quickly. When you're cruising along, it's recommended to maybe to close this one, and you'll be able to hear that it's closed. You'll close this one when you're running along, and you'll just bring this one to the point where it stops the train brakes from leaking on. So as you see here, the brakes are actually both released. The brakes are released, the ejectors are off, and you see the train brake is just creeping on to simulate a small leak in the train pipe. So we just open that one just a little bit, just to counteract that leak. Okay, now I'll take you around to the front of the engine. I'm sure everyone's had a play around with these, but just in case anyone hasn't, I'll show them off. If you press Control 1, Control 2, Control 3, 4, 5 or 6, all with Control, you'll get the discs. As you can see, you also get the corresponding electric light. If the generator is switched off, you only get the disc. Also at the front, if you press Control 7, you'll get an old style tail lamp. If you press Control 8, you'll get a modern high intensity headlamp. If you press Control 9, you'll get a modern tail lamp. On the back of the engine, on the tender, it's exactly the same numbers, but rather than just pressing Control, you press Control Shift 1 and you'll get the same. These are toggled on and off with the same controls, so it'll be Control 1 to turn on, Control 1 to turn off. While we're here, I'll set up the front of the engine for today's run down to, I think down to Hereford is where we'll stop. Just find a suitable headboard. There we go. And I'll put up some discs and the modern lamp. How long did it take? How long did it take to make something so good? Hard to say really, because it was very on and off. Lots of things happened in between, but yeah, hard to say really. But I will take the compliment. Thank you. What does the D stand for on the reverser? The D on the reverser stands for drift. So when the engine's coasting, the driver would put it into the D position for drift. Drift as in coasting. So when the regulator's shut, it will go into the drift position. And I believe the reasoning behind the drift position is it's a good position for basically keeping wear and tear to a minimum, I believe. Although, please do correct me if I'm wrong. Okay, so now we're now that we've gone through everything, I think the only thing that we didn't go through maybe was the cab vent and the whistle, but we we all know what that one does. So I've got the reverser in full forward, 75%. Cylinder cocks are open. Let's put on the automatic fireman. The brakes are off, as you can see. We've got 21 on the gauge. Now close that. And we'll just bring that back a bit. And we'll just gently open the regulator. And you can see I don't open it and leave it open. I tend to pump it just to keep the steam chest pressure at a sensible value. And this helps avoid any slippage that may occur. At this point, pretty much as soon as you start moving, you can wind it back to about 60%. Shut the drain cocks. Engine's making quite a bit of noise, so I'll put an injector on. Now as you can see, that's bringing the pressure down, keeping the engine quiet. And now we'll just let the engine just gently accelerate. Whilst it's doing this, it is warming up. That has been simulated on this loco. When steam engines are sat stationary for a while, the pipes cool down, condensation occurs, which is why we use the drain cocks. So it does take a while for everything to just warm back up again and get going, if you like. One thing I would like to point out, and it was something related to something that I mentioned earlier, the frame rate on this route is quite good. It's quite smooth. And that does have a drastic impact on the way in which this engine handles, going back to what I mentioned before. So as you can see, I've got one injector on. Just wind it back a bit, open the regulator a little bit more. The pressure's coming down a bit, but it's nothing too bad. I've got a suitable amount of water in the boiler, so I'll switch that up for now. And we'll let the engine gently accelerate away. Bellerophon Productions, yes, this is the Welsh Marches. We've just left Shrewsbury. So as you can see, boiler pressure's already come back. Now this should be an interesting run because we'll be climbing more or less all the way to Church Stretton, but I have a feeling we'll probably be going through there at least 60 miles an hour. Okay, open it right up. As you can see, now the engine's warmed up. I'm working it quite hard, but this is also creating a really strong draft. So the fire's getting really hot. Now I'm going to put on an injector again. And as you can see, that has stopped the safety valves blowing off. But the pressure isn't going down. In fact, the pressure is going up. One thing that I have found with this engine, and a couple of other engines actually, is that the harder you work it, the better it performs in some instances. Accelerating slowly as well on a 1 in 127 gradient. See, I think there's a few more questions about the Welsh Marches. I mentioned it earlier, but I'll mention it again. Dovetail Games and myself are working on something that will hopefully mean that in the near future it will reappear on the Steam store. You can take that as semi-official if you like, but hopefully in the near future there will be something more official, so stay tuned. Yes, with the injectors, both of the injectors are live injectors. The Bully Pacifics, I believe, didn't have exhaust injectors at all, which is interesting, but perhaps the boilers are so good that they didn't feel that they were needed. So, accelerating nicely, one injector on, water level's not too bad, I might just stick another one on. With 2 injectors, it is likely that the pressure will come down a fair bit, but when the engine's making so much steam, as soon as you switch it off, you'll soon find that you're at full pressure again. As you can see, I haven't quite got the small ejector open enough, so I'll just open that up just a little bit more. There we go. And you can see we've already used nearly 300 gallons of water. If we go over here, you'll be able to see it's starting to come down. Okay, down to 225 psi now. I'm just going to switch that second injector off and keep the other one running. As you can see, the pressure's coming around very, very quickly. But as I mentioned, on routes, particularly routes around London where there's a lot of AI, you might struggle with this because the frame rate drastically affects the way in which the game works under the hood. So we're on a 1 in 154 gradient now, and we're still accelerating. I've still got it in about 35% maybe. Regulator's still wide open, about to blow off again, so I'll put that second injector on. And note how the automatic fireman is just going about his business. I mean, unfortunately, like I said earlier, there's no realistic way in which they could use the injector as well without keeping the water at 1. So the best way, in my opinion, is to use the injectors manually. But they're toggled on and off with L and O, or K and I. Switch that one back off. Okay, now we're getting underway. We're 50 miles an hour. I'll probably bring it back down to about 25% now. Oh, that nearly called me out then. I was reading the chat. I wonder how many people have been distracted by that sort of thing before. Maybe you've been typing to a friend on another page and then suddenly the ADRS has gone off. You get there just a bit too late. It's happened to me far too many times. Let's pop that second injector on again. While we're here, I don't know if any of you knew, but British India Line was actually the first merchant navy to be rebuilt into this condition. And as the prototype, it did have a few minor detail differences. The ejector exhaust pipe that you can see running along the boiler here is a slightly different shape. This angle on the rest of the class was actually about here. Also, the sandbox filler pipes are different at the front here. The rest of the class just having a very short filler pipe for the sandboxes. Okay, I'll switch off that second injector now. As you can see, even at around 225 psi, the engine will perform quite well. But it's also worth remembering that in the original condition, these engines had a boiler pressure of 280 psi, which sounds crazy, but one can only imagine how well those engines must have performed when they're in good condition. It is said by some that the rebuilt Merchant Navies were actually a bit of a downgrade. Well, here comes that boiler pressure again, so injectors on. Hi Samuel, I've just seen your message. Are you trying to use the automatic fireman when the F4 HUD is up? Because I believe that can cause some issues. Or is the in-game automatic fireman switched on? Okay, let's switch that off. Looks like I've actually overfilled the boiler, so I'm going to switch them both off for now. So one thing that does catch you out is when you're on a steeper gradient, the water level will rise up here. Good way of demonstrating how that works is if you get a plastic bottle and fill it with water and look at it from the side, tilt it at one end and imagine that the water gauge is at one end. You'll see the water just disappears. If you tip it up, you'll see the water goes right up. Same thing that's happening here. Right, I'm quite confident that we're making plenty of steam now, so I'm actually going to wind it right forward, so back to 35% and really accelerate. Although we are on a 1 in 90 at the moment, so perhaps not. Down to 0.88 of water, so I'll switch the injector back on. As you can see, the fireman's doing his thing. Are we going to do the unrebuilt version? Hard to say at the moment, as got some other ideas for doing something a little bit different, but I will say never, because quite often these things are quite spontaneous. Actually, I'll wake up one morning and decide, you know what, I'm going to make this loco. So never say never. It might happen. It might not. I'm just going to close this. Oh, the injector's open, the damper's open, of course, yeah. Are we likely to bring a rebuilt bullet light Pacific to the game? Again, never say never. I mean, these are quite similar. A lot of similarities, a lot of shared components. In fact, most of the components are shared. It's not on the list, but as I say never. It might happen. Duke of Gloucester. Now that would be a wonderful engine to do. The difficulty with most locos is sound recordings. As you know, I can be a bit of a stickler for sounds. If possible, I'll always try and get the best sounds possible, and with the Merchant Navy I was very, very privileged to have help from the very generous Merchant Navy Locomotive Preservation Society. They helped me get some fantastic sound recordings and also fantastic photo reference as well, which really helps make a very accurate model. At the moment, Duke of Gloucester's in parts, and it's unlikely. Well, we're unsure basically when it's going to come back. It's a wonderful engine. I'd love to be able to make a model of it at some point, but we'll have to see what happens really. But it's, as I say, it's not on the list, but it'll certainly be nice. So we'll see where we are. So we're approaching Church Stretton now. We're not quite doing the 60 I was hoping for, but there we go. It's worth bearing in mind, we have got 12 coaches here as well. Still going up a 1 in 100 gradient, but soon we'll be coasting. What I'll do now, excuse me, what I'll do now is, because I know that the gradients are about to go downhill, I've switched off the automatic fireman, just so that we're not wasting too much steam. Hi Bossman, you could do the Princess Royal Pacific from the LMS. Again, a wonderful engine, would love to make it. I wish I could make a clone of myself to make all of these different engines, just so we could have a little factory going, but again, comes down to sounds. I need to, you know, I need to see what's what really, but again, not on the list, but we shall see. Right, here we come to Church Stretton. The gradient has eased off a little bit. Just going to wind that back. Not many photographers out to see us, it's rather disappointing, but there we go. Ah, you like the firebox door animation? Yeah, it took quite a long time to do actually, and a lot of head scratching, but we got there in the end. What sounds did you use for the Black Fives? We recorded 45407 on a mainline run, and also had some stationary sound recordings of the Black Five from the Mid-Hants Railway. Hayden 2012. Yes, all the locos you can change the colour of the nameplates. They can all be done in the loco number in the scenario editor. If you check out the manual, all the digits are explained in there. So as you can see now, we're actually coasting along quite quick. We're quickly approaching 70. I'm going to open the blower a bit just so we keep that draft going. And it also just helps maintain that boiler pressure. Switch on the second injector just to bring the boiler water level up to about 0.6, 0.7, somewhere around there. Matt Locock. Yes. Yes, Steam Sound Supreme do have permission to do their sound pack for the Black 5, yes. Over the blower up a little bit more. And we'll shut the regulator as well. We're going quite fast. Switch off the second injector. Keep the this one open, or on, shall I say. And the rest of the route from here, or at least to Hereford, is relatively easy. If you want, I can do a full-length one and continue chatting with you guys, or we can get to Hereford and I can end it there. It's completely up to you. We'll switch off that injector now. You see the boiler pressure's actually come down a fair bit there. I was too busy reading your messages, but just opening the blower up a bit there while we're coasting down the hill will solve that problem for us. Approaching Craven Arms now. Should get a nice little wobble over the points as we fly through. I don't know if those of you who've got the Welsh Marches, if you thought that was a realistic thing that we did there with the rough track over the points. Maybe it was a bit too much. It'd be great to get your thoughts on that. Samuel Condon, have you switched off the automatic fireman in the game settings and then tried using the built-in automatic fireman that is built into the Loco? Maybe try that, give that a go. Okay. See. Let the water level build up a bit too quick there. What's going on there? Get me a little bit confusing sometimes, don't realise what injectors are on and which ones aren't. But now the line's levelled off a little bit, I'm just going to give it a gentle bit of encouragement, but nothing too drastic. It should tick along fairly nicely. Okay, I'll switch the automatic fireman back on now. It's not necessarily needed, but we need to make sure the fire doesn't get too low for times when we do need a little bit of encouragement. After Leominster, there is a speed reduction to about 60, so if you want to stay above 70, you may want to just a little bit of a bigger fire just to help you with the acceleration away from that area. Just looking in the chat, so you're talking about the Black 5. That was one of the first locos we did. Unfortunately, you cannot change the shed code on that loco. Hello Laserjet. Watched your video last night, very good, really enjoyed it. So we'll switch the automatic fireman back off now. Keep the door open a crack. Or maybe we'll close it actually. I'm very well, thanks. I was a little bit tired yesterday. Things were going crazy at this end, but managed to get through it all. Approaching Ludlow, let's go to the station and get a nice sweeping shot of the loco coming through. Pop an injector on now. One thing I would recommend when driving this engine, and this is very much a realistic thing as mainline steam drivers will do it, when you're coasting along, when you shut the regulator, open the blower straight away. Just to maintain that draft through the fire. The flat cap photographer. Oh, that's no problem at all. I'm here to help. It's no problem at all. Glad we got it sorted. Whatever it was. I'm sorry. I don't know who you are exactly from your YouTube name, but to everyone I've helped over the last couple of days with their problems, honestly, no problem at all. I'd rather get it sorted. looks like we're approaching Wooferton. I believe there was a station at Wooferton once. In fact, along the Welsh Marches there were loads of stations that were closed, probably during the beaching area, I'd imagine, or thereabouts. Is there anything detrimental about having the blower wide open all the time while driving? In reality, no, not so much. As Trains Are Just Great has pointed out, it can destroy the fire. If you've got a thick fire, if you keep the firebox door shut and there's no cold air going through the boiler tubes, it's not too much of a problem really, but it's not advised. Oh, a bit of a wobble over the points there. Did you guys like that feature in the on the Welsh Marches line? All the points we made just a little bit more rough, just to try and make it a little bit more interesting. Is that a feature you guys liked? Steve Potter in the chat. Hello sir, how are you? Get that automatic fireman on again. Did I learn about the blower technique from the MNLPS or the DB Cruise? Actually, about 10 years ago, for 5 years I was a part of a support crew. I worked with Nunny Castle for most of that time. Also ended up spending a bit of time on Britannia, Bittern, a few other engines, Braunton. And just watch what all the crews are doing, really. And to some degree that has helped shape the way these add-ons come out, really. I don't think if I hadn't have done that sort of thing earlier on in my life, then perhaps I wouldn't be doing this now. So there we go. Bring back Welsh Marches, says Jack Simpson. I mentioned it earlier in the stream. Dovetail Games and myself are hoping that in the near future we'll be able to bring you some news on that. So stay tuned. Have we been through Leominster yet? I can't remember. No, we're approaching it. Excellent. I'm getting distracted now. I haven't been putting water into the boiler. That's very bad of me, so let's stick them both on for now. I'm sure Transport for Wales would love to partner. Unfortunately, that isn't down to me. That's down to whether they want to, and also whether Dovetail Games want to go down that particular avenue. It's not really my call, unfortunately. What I will say though, having a little bit of insider knowledge, is that Dovetail Games will do all they can to partner with various railway companies. That is all they can do, really. All they can do, they do. Then the rest is down to the train operating companies ultimately. DCG are hopeless. I'm not sure they are actually. We often forget that if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have this game at all. So I actually quite like Dovetail Games for that. There we go. Just gone through Leominster. Often mispronounced as Leominster, as I used to call it. We'll be slowing down shortly for a 60-mile-an-hour section through the tunnels at Dinmore. Woodley Pacifics are the perfect engine for pure ASMR. Would you consider doing a dynamic whistle in the future? Dynamic whistles are great, but it does depend on how well the sound recordings come out, because it can sound quite bad if it's not done correctly. How is it pronounced? Leominster. I used to say Leominster, but I got laughed at. Hope I'm not speeding. Oh, no, I am. Okay. Oh, 65 miles an hour, not 60. I was close. So we're about to slow down. So what I'll do here is actually open up this small ejector so that it's ready. We'll bring this down a bit. Usually around 10 on the gauge. As you can see there. And you can just dance the handle up and down just to keep it at around that mark. And then when you approach the speed you want, just lift it up, the handle up that is, and the needle will gradually creep towards the release position. There we go. Doing 63.5, just about right. Let's switch the cab light off, shall we? So you can see the gauge lights. There's the gauge lights. And the little reverser light as well. Interestingly, I believe the unrebuilt, or at least some of them, had backlit gauges, and the actual gauge face was black, and it was the numbers that were white, and they had a light behind them, I think. Similar to how a car's dashboard is, I guess. Okay, we're not too far off Hereford now. Once we get to Hereford, shall I carry on going? Do you guys want to chat more? We can take the train all the way down to Newport if you like. If not, if you guys are happy, I can end at Hereford. Completely up to you. Just let me know. Spam the chat. Let me know. Disable the automatic fireman now because we are approaching Hereford. Luckily, we've got quite a bit of room in the boiler for water, so if we're in a station and the engine starts to blow off, then at least we'll have space to fill up with water. Keep going to Plymouth. I would, but I think we might run out of track. I missed a trick when I said spam the chat, didn't I? I should have said spam can the chat. Wasn't quick enough for that one. Morton on lug. If any of you ever find yourself in this area of the country and there's a steam rail tour on, this is actually a pretty good place to go if you want to get some high speed running, particularly going in the north direction. And on this crossing you get a really nice shot of trains coming across. Now, it looks as though I missed the AWS then because I was too busy talking about photograph locations and stuff. Now with the AWS on the BR locos, it isn't actually AWS, it's automatic train, I think it's automatic train control, ATC. It doesn't work quite the same way, so when you cancel it, the brakes will still come off. Whereas with the Clan line, if you miss it, the brakes will go on, then you'll have to wait a minute or two for the brake system to reset before the brakes will come back off. Very irritating, but very realistic as well. Oh, red signal. How unusual. And it was denied. So we got access, so we gone past it. Hey, look. I'm just going to keep going. Hopefully the signals will sort themselves out by the time we get to Hereford. Apparently not. Is there a train in front? Oh, there is. Blimey. In that case, we better stop. It's the beauty of Train Simulator, you see. Always expect the unexpected. It's been so long since I've driven this route, I can't remember actually adding in that AI for the quick drive, but certainly makes it more interesting. Very interesting if you go past the red signal like I just did. And yeah, this part is how not to drive, okay? West Coast Railway Company, you're hired. Maybe I can just edit this bit out, you know. I know you guys won't judge. Come on, let's face it. You've all done it. You've all done it. See where that HST is showing. Okay, so I need to stop at the next signal. Maybe once or 12 times. I saw nothing. Yeah, keep it that way. Let's just pretend we haven't. That didn't happen, okay, guys? It's all good. See how much water we've used. Wow. Nearly half a tender. Which would be about right. On most Welsh Marches rail tours, they typically start in Bristol. By around the Newport area, you'll be stopping for your first water stop, and then there'll be another one perhaps around Hereford, somewhere like that. So it's about right. I do wonder if we'll get to Newport there, because the second half of the route is a bit more up and down. When you release a patch, do I have to uninstall the previous version? Not always, but if you want to make sure that you're getting the very, very latest, then it won't do any harm if you do decide to uninstall it. Usually the installer should, in theory, just overwrite everything. Now that HST is disappearing. Where's he off to? Well, this should be interesting, following an HST. Then again, if we stop at Hereford, maybe it won't be too bad. a little bit over enthusiastic there with the brake. Right, looks like the HST's got out of the way anyway. Got a green signal. Stop here for a couple of minutes and then we'll carry on. And one thing that I certainly have trouble with, and I wonder if you guys do as well, is the first big engine, if you like, that I've driven in a train simulator, at least for a long time. And I forget how far forward the front of the engine is from the cab, so I always end up thinking I'm stopping before the signal, but actually I just go past it just a little bit. I mean, really, I'm just making excuses for bad driving, but, you know. Right, I'll leave it here just for a couple of minutes, and then I'll be back with you shortly. You see, that's what happens when you go to make a new drink. You come back and find your engine's rolling through the red signal. It was interesting. Now would be a good time to show off all the extra animated bits. Okay, there aren't too many, but there are some. Control Shift Y will open up the tender water filler, and actually in there, if you look in there, there is water, and it does go up and down. So if we filled up now, that would go up to the top. We haven't modelled the inside of the tender properly, just because, well, it's a little bit much, isn't it? But you can see it from here, and you know, it looks realistic. Here, one thing actually I didn't show off in the trailer is this little thing here. Now, while I'm sat here, I do actually need to open the drain cock, so there we go. That's the valve for opening the drain cock. The whistle's animated. This little valve with a little cord there that runs along the boiler. And the front and rear damper are both animated. I think that's everything. Obviously you've got the mechanical lubricators, they go round when you're on the move. Just fill the boiler with water, get plenty in there. What's that copper pipe on the left side of the cab? Which one? There's quite a few copper pipes on this. Is the damper opening a feature on the LMS engines? No, it isn't, because the dampers on those are actually in between the frames. You can't see them. The only way you see them is if you poke your head up underneath the loco. But on the LMS engines there is a light that sort of shows that the damper is open on the track. We'll give it a few more minutes and then we'll get underway. Bit of shameless advertising over here. Look at it. These people thinking they can just tell us what to buy. Now we're talking. How about that? Okay, let's get going. Right, let's see. Do we think we're going to get to Newport with some water in the tender or no water in the tender? Let me know what you think. I have a feeling maybe it'll be no water if we even get to Newport. We might run out by then. Let's see what happens. We might be lucky actually. Downhill from, it's more or less downhill from Abergavenny. There is one slight uphill, but how would mainline firemen prevent the locos from blowing off at a station? Usually what they would do is, well, they'd have a timetable so they know when the driver's going to stop. So they'd prepare the fire, just run it down a little bit, and also make sure there's enough space in the boiler to top up with water, because adding water cools the water that's already in the boiler. That lowers the boiling rate and also reduces the steam pressure a bit. Hopefully that HST is way ahead of us now. It did stop for quite a long time, so let's see where he is. So it's more or less climbing all the way now to a place called Langby Hangle. I've butchered the pronunciation of that. It's one of those Welsh words with the two L's at the beginning, very hard to pronounce. But that's the summit of the line. It's a few miles north of Abergavenny. Once we're there, it's more or less downhill, so see how we get on. So if you look in the head out view, you can see the mechanical lubricators doing their thing. And they'll be feeding oil to the cylinders and possibly to the axle boxes as well, just keeping everything nicely lubricated. It does make a nice sound when it's going about this speed. Would it be possible to add numbers to the root discs? We thought about this. There's so many numbers that could be added. It would become quite messy and quite hard to do, I think. Because bear in mind there's 6 discs on the front, 6 discs on the back, and then each disc could carry up to 3 digits. Soon get quite difficult and possibly quite confusing for players as well, I think. How am I? I'm very well, thank you. How are you? I guess the only way we could have done the numbers on the discs would have been to have additional discs with a restricted set of numbers. But I think you've either got to do all of them or do none of them, you know? That water level is getting quite low in the tender now. We've still got another 30 miles to go. This could get interesting. Not too far away from the summit now. Coming from the northbound direction, this route isn't quite so tough. When you're starting at Newport, it's quite difficult. You're more or less straight on the climb. 1.5 miles from the summit now. One thing I hope I've proved or shown in this video is that actually an advanced steam engine isn't too hard to drive really once you understand what's going on. It can more or less drive itself quite similar to a diesel in some regards. I mean, you have the fire that you have to keep a look at and the water level as well, but besides those two things it isn't too difficult. Once you understand what the reverser does and this sort of thing, it's not too bad. There's certainly a lot more to think about as well. I mean, you're constantly looking at various dials and controls and things. It certainly keeps you on your toes. We're going down the hill now. Close that. You can just about hold the brake if you get the handle in the right position. It's quite handy for going down hills. Might need to be adjusted slightly here and there. Don't forget the AWS, yeah, don't forget that. Approaching Abergavenny now. 900 gallons of water left, mostly downhill, 18 miles. Might be alright. Does anyone have any more questions about driving this, or maybe got some different questions? You know what, I'm not sure I've ever run out of water in a tender on the Loco before in TS. Could be a first. Does the game end when you run out of water in the tender? Don't even know. Now we're on a slight uphill towards, I think it's Little Mill Junction. Might be wrong. Tell you what, it's got to be said though, hasn't it? These coaches by Armstrong Powerhouse, absolutely fantastic, and needed for so long as well. I mean, the Dovetail Games coaches, they did us well for a long time, but really these are just epic, aren't they? Absolutely epic. $700 gallons left, 13 miles. What was the most difficult part when creating the Merchant Navy for Train Simulator? Ooh, the most difficult part. It's a good question. Usually the most difficult things are creating complex shapes like this brake setup here. Making the model for that was quite hard. Same with the reverser. I mean, all of this is quite difficult stuff to model. And also getting the shape of the boiler right, that was quite hard as well, particularly where the cylindrical shape of the boiler turns into the more square shape of the firebox. That was quite hard to make. And the wheels are different too. They were quite interesting to make, but it was whilst difficult, it was also quite enjoyable. It was quite fun. It's always good to challenge yourself and try new things, right? Here's Little Mill Junction. I'm not sure where the line here used to go. It's just cut off now, but I'm sure someone somewhere in the chat may be able to answer that. Rather than using the brakes for the 50 mile an hour, I'm just going to use the gradient to my advantage. Just shut the regulator and just let it roll to the speed that we need. And now we're back on the downhill, and it's downhill now all the way to Newport. How do you define whether air brakes or vacuum brakes will be used? It'll always be vacuum brakes. Even the model of Clan Line technically is vacuum brake, although it does simulate an air brake train. It doesn't actually have air brakes, if you like. As has been mentioned in the chat, you can change the brake mode using page up or page down. I will be doing a patch to the manual to add a few more bits, by the way. Bit of a water problem, yeah, there's not a lot left. That's alright though, we've got 9 miles of downhill, so fingers crossed we'll be okay. wonder what's going on here. There's like some sort of caravan showroom or something. Or convention. Who knows? I think we're going to make it, you know. Who has the best caravan? Either they're all winners or they're all losers. It look like all the caravans are the same. Was the camera position tricky to implement? Yes. We tried to get our view from the seat looking down the boiler, but because the window, when looked at head on, is actually quite narrow, you end up clipping through the model up here, which was a shame. I mean, you can see there's a little bit of clipping here, but we were just trying to get it as close as we could, which is why we went for the head out view in the end. Oh, speeding again. Oh dear. Hi Oliver. I will be adding that to the manual at some point in the future. So keep your eyes peeled for an update, and it should be in there. Just about to go over the bridge over the River Usk. Interesting little thing. If you care about these sort of things, this is the first asset I made for the route. How do I go about choosing what locos to model? Hard to say really. Part of it is personal preference. Sometimes I see what routes are available and see what's missing. It's mostly personal preference really. Some things that I would like to model I probably never will model, just because there's either nowhere for them to run or they're a bit too obscure. $350 gallons left. Not bad. Would you do any GWR engines? Absolutely. I don't discriminate. I'll happily make most trains. Will the Welsh Marches route become available again? I said earlier in the stream as well. I'm working with Dovetail Games to hopefully have it back out at some point. Hopefully I'll have something more solid and a bit more official soon-ish. But yeah, very much would like to get it back out again. It's a great route. It's great fun. It's quite long. It runs very well actually, considering how long it is. It's quite smooth. Lots of gradients as well. Well, there we are, guys. I hope you enjoyed the stream. I hope that it maybe helped you with your knowledge of the Loco and how to get to grips with driving it and that sort of thing. If you do have any more questions, feel free to ask them on the Facebook page, and I'll try my best to answer those for you. And if you have any bugs or any issues with it at all, then feel free to send a message via the website. Thank you very much, guys.